Welcome to the stage, the moderator for this session, Lara from Cybus.
Thank you so much, and hi, welcome to everyone. My name is Lara Ludwigs, I'm VP Commercial at Cybus, and I will be moderating you through the next 60 minutes. And today, as you can see, we have 4 great panelists joining us. But before directly jumping into the panel discussion, I'd like to do a quick housekeeping for everyone who's participating. On the right-hand side, you can see that there's a chat functionality. You're invited to use the chat functionality throughout the whole discussion. So please comment, share what you have to add, or you can also disagree with the debate that is going on. Besides the chat function, you can also see a thread that is called Q&A. Please keep in mind that this Q&A session is for your questions towards the panelists. So if you have a question that you would like to ask them, please put it in the Q&A session, not in the chat, because in the chat we might lose the overview of everything. So question, Q&A, comments and conversations with the other participants in the chat. Besides that, I'd directly jump into the introduction and head over to our panelists, starting with Peter. Peter, could you introduce yourself very briefly with 1 to 2 sentences, and what's your background?
Yeah, thank you very much, Lara. Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to have all of you joining this session on this very important topic. I'm Peter Zorovka. I'm the founder and CEO of Cybus. Cybus is an industrial IoT software company, so we care about controlling and managing data in factories and manufacturing environments. And from this point of view, data sovereignty is a topic that's deeply rooted in our heart and our product strategy, of course. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you so much, Peter. Then Mark, I'd continue with you.
Thank you, Lara. So my name is Mark Jekle. I'm the technical head of Smart Factory at myOneWolf. myOneWolf is a custom software development company, and we are building hybrid cloud smart factory platforms for our customers. And also we implement all kinds of smart factory use cases on top of these platforms, from operational applications like operator terminals to data and AI use cases.
Thank you, Mark. And handing over to you, Martin.
Yeah, hi, my name is Martin. I'm from Schunk. Schunk is a company working in the automation field. So we build everything that is necessary for robots and big machines. So we build grippers, clamping units. And my role is I'm running the innovation department. So I basically touch on all the issues right now related to data, to manufacturing, and bringing all the bits and pieces together.
Thanks. And Alexander, you're jumping in for Daniel, who actually wanted to join us. Thank you for jumping in so spontaneously. Alexander, could you share your background?
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Lara. My name is Alexander Hudic. I'm head of security and digital sovereignty at Schwarz Group. Schwarz Group is focused or is coming from the domain of consumer retail. I'm coming from the background cybersecurity with more than 20 years of experience. And within the last 15 years, I was mainly focused in manufacturing world with a strong focus on automotive, but now also on consumer retail.
Thank you so much. I really love the constellation that we have here, and also looking into the audience. Of course, we would like to know a little bit more about you. This is why we prepared a short poll that I'm just starting. You should see it on your screen, so that we get to know you and the background that you're bringing to really make sure we deliver the most valuable content within this panel discussion. The poll will also stay open throughout the panel discussion. You can always look up the answers in the duration, and some answers are already provided. I give us 30 more seconds because I have the feeling that it's quite equally distributed, similar as in this round here. Yes. All right, thank you everyone for participating. Please continue if you haven't done so. And then I would say we start right away into the topic of sovereignty. And of course, before we go into details, I'd like to create a big picture and define what actually is sovereignty. Peter, maybe you can assist me here with the first question, because we would like to talk about the context of sovereignty and which dimensions we should consider when we discuss it in this round?
Yeah, thanks, Lara. This is the most difficult question at the beginning. I think sovereignty is a really big word. It's a large concept, and it's discussed in all types of aspects nowadays. I think we have this one big topic of sovereign cloud and sovereign software, which of course deals with the question who's actually in control about the digital infrastructure that we are using, we as private persons, but of course, in the context of today's discussion, we as a company. So giving up control and sovereignty in exchange to receiving everything as a service is, of course, a big topic nowadays, and under the political situation in the world, a topic that is currently, I think, being reconsidered to a large part in many companies. But today's discussion focuses on data sovereignty, and data sovereignty and sovereign cloud, of course, are two topics that are connected, but not necessarily the same. When I talk about data sovereignty, the first question I have is, am I actually in control about my data? So this is not about foreign forces or somebody else being in control. Sometimes, especially in manufacturing environments, nobody actually is in control because there's a mess of systems that's connected to each other, or data is really not accessible. So a governance system is missing. But in the next step, when we start integrating manufacturing environments into third-party systems, of course, question of who then is in control and to which degree are we dependent from our manufacturing processes on these parties. Very simply put, does my production stop when AWS or Cloudflare has a hiccup? This is a very simple way of putting it. And if you say yes, probably yes, then there's something about the data sovereignty and even the operation sovereignty that you still maintain as a company. So I think this is a topic which really has to be addressed at a very high level, because that's getting serious.
Thank you, Peter. Anything to add from this round? Because I'm well aware there's so many aspects, starting from legal, operational, technical, strategical aspects that Peter just mentioned.
Yeah, well, as Peter said, it's complicated. I mean, for us as an operating company, I mean, we're not afraid that when a connection is cut from the outside and machines will stand still, because most of the companies, and I'm talking really about the majority of the companies right now, they don't rely on the connectivity to the outside. They rely on the connectivity within the company. So it covers only a part of that. So, but for us, the major concern we have is that we need the trust whenever let's start differently. So we know that in the future, if we want to be efficient and effective in our manufacturing, we have to share information. We have to share data with other companies, with other partners, and that will only happen when we've got trust in the systems that we're using right now. And that, for me, is really one of those really very critical questions we have to answer. How can we make sure that we know that we have to share information, we have to share data, and we have to do that in a very trustful manner? That, for me, is really one of the biggest challenges we have right now.
Good point. Looking into the trust part, this is actually the challenging part, and this is also the question: why does sovereignty matter, and what is its impact? And I would like to jump into the trust part a little deeper and ask ourselves, is sovereignty actually a regulatory burden, or does it have an economic impact? Because often it's seen as adding complexity and adding costs. But for example, trust, does it have an economic impact? And this is what I would look into with you a little more precisely, and starting with you again, Martin, because you mentioned it. if you do not act, if you do not make sure that you have a sovereign data sovereignty and sovereign infrastructure, what is the impact for manufacturing companies today? And how does it specifically limit innovation and digital value creation?
So yeah, well, the most important part is that if whatever you want to do, and I'm not talking about the innovation that happens when you go into different kind of products and business models and everything. More about how can I make sure that the operation of my manufacturing plant is most optimal. For that, what you need is transparency. Today we don't have that. At least we don't have that at the scale that is necessary. We don't have that with all the insights we need from all the different machine and so on. So that for me is really what will drive for the future. What is important to maintain if you wanna be gain efficiency, if you want to stay competitive. Here is basically what we have to do most. Find a way that we're able to exchange and share with the right people, with the control about who will see what kind of information and how we're going to share that information, how we can schedule specific things, having the trust that the data is right. So what we do for now and where we spend most time on is indeed how we're going to organize all the information and data within the company. So with the fact that we are talking about now sharing and going into a world where a lot of people will have access to some of the data, enforces us to go back into our own systems, making sure that the data is right, the data is in a good shape. We've got the data is verified. We define data owners that decide about who is doing what with the data and so on. So it's a lot of structural issues that we tackle right now on the inside, but that will give us in the future the leverage that is necessary to gain on efficiency and make sure that also in our partner ecosystem that we're able to work faster and more reliable. Those are for now the biggest challenges we see.
Shedding the light on a solution vendor's perspective, Alexander, what kind of impact do you see that sovereign solutions have for manufacturers?
Well, from the perspective of Schwarz Group, manufacturing is a big part of our business. That's why we've taken the liberty to look at the digital sovereignty from a more abstract perspective, taking both data and services into perspective, as well as the governance around it. We have looked at it also from the perspective of being independent, being able to have the autonomy to decide about data, about the technology, about the processes, and how to make sure that the supply chain remains continuously resilient. This was our core focus, so that's why we've decided to, first of all, internally consolidate and structure the definition of digital sovereignty. Our core focus goes into the three essential aspect: technology, regulation, and organization. Throughout these three core elements, we have built a detailed view throughout IT, OT, IoT, as well as edge and cloud. So we wanted to unify that in a very holistic way in order to build governance model around it, in order to make a benchmark out of it, in order to benchmark ourselves, but also to help other companies to structure it. Coming to the part of the manufacturing, sovereignty plays a very vital role in context of cybersecurity and therefore especially in resiliency. So this is where we set a very core focus on in order to make sure that our processes remain resilient.
Thank you for sharing, Peter. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think in the end, Martin, also to comment on what you said. This is all a function of finding the right balance between risk and value, right? So my favorite example is a couple of years ago, and maybe still today, people were afraid of sharing private information with Google, for example. But whenever I open my phone and I choose to use Google Maps, when I get into the car, choose to use Google Maps, there's this little pop-up in the beginning. Google Maps now wants to access your location live. Okay, I accept that, because the value of the service I receive, Google Maps, navigation, live traffic data, and so on, knowing on the minute when I will arrive, is so high that I accept this privacy infringement that Google now knows where I am. Why do I do that? Because Google is not an evil player, which is a private risk for myself. But what is the sovereign part about that is, at any point I can choose to not use Google Maps, and I can choose to switch to a different map service provider once I start mistrusting Google just for the sake of the example, or to use Google Maps just to look it up, but disabling my location services. And I think this is a very tangible example of how we find the balance between sharing very private data, where I am, where I travel, where I was yesterday, with a large company, with a third party, but for receiving a very valuable service, but still remain sovereign about if I use that. And I think this is one of the favorite examples I usually use when I talk to customers, because whenever you start using a cloud service, and Salesforce is an example, containing all the CRM and customer data, you're accepting that risk and this information sharing because the value is so high. And I think this is where we really have to look after that we remain sovereign with every further project we are starting, even if this digitization really scales faster and faster and faster with AI and all the cloud usage.
It's a good point, and I like these examples. I do the same with my contacts, which context is a little bit different, but there's one difference, at least from the perception of the data and the data we share, is that of course I don't want to share the location where I am with everybody, but it's okay, as he said, when I've got a certain value against that. And that the same will happen for the manufacturing industry when there's a benefit out of giving information to partners or to customers or to whoever, to suppliers. Everybody will do that when there's some benefit out of that. The tricky thing is, and here is something which makes everything a little bit more complex, is that the companies are all afraid of sending away information that can be used by somebody else, like a construction plan of something, or information about how things are set up, how things are done. And that is an information, when it's leaked, it's gone. Your location is only valid for the time while you're sharing it. So that is maybe the only minor the thing we have to care about. The example I always give is, at the beginning I said I never want to share the contact information I have on my phone with anybody else. And of course now I do, because I see the benefit, because having that backed up somewhere, and I don't mind so much if somebody knows about my contacts. So there's always that trade-off between, as you said, there's a risk and there's a benefit, and we have to make sure that the benefit is more important than the risk. And we've got suppliers like Schwarzer or other partners, where at least we know that they apply to the European restrictions, and we gotta be able to have a higher trust than some other suppliers from outside Europe.
Martin, that's a good keyword which I would like to pick up and take a step back and look at the global picture. Because we're looking here into EU reference architecture and EU data sovereignty. And we have a lot of people in the audience that come from American countries, from Asian countries, from African countries. I also saw in the chat a couple of countries outside of the EU. So why should they care? Why should non-EU players care about data sovereignty? And Mark, maybe this is a question I would directly hand over to you. How does it shape global cloud strategies and interoperability standards?
I think it's not really about EU players or non-EU players. I think it's really a relevant topic for any manufacturing company. So to gain this flexibility that we just talked about, to be able and to control where you want to run your applications, process your data, I think this is important for any company. So it's for a lot of our customers, it's also about making yourself not too dependent on a specific vendor, on a specific cloud provider, that you're able to maybe deploy something on-prem, but then maybe switch again to the cloud so that you have this flexibility. So for example, I might want to run my production critical workloads that really interact with my production close to the machines on an on-prem solution, and other things I might want to do in the cloud because I have certain advantages from the flexibility in terms of resources, or I have some great data analytics platform that is being provided there. But in the end, I want to keep as much flexibility as possible. And this is where things like open source, open standards come in, where in the past, especially in the OT area, we had a couple of big players that weren't willing to share their data, or that it was difficult to get your data out of the systems. And there's a lot of movement in that area that people think a lot more about open standards, about things like unified namespace, providing data in an easy way to make it consumable, to standardize the data and make it accessible for your business.
Very
I
well
can relate to
said.
that.
Go ahead.
So I can definitely relate to that from the Schwarz Digits perspective. So the business model is definitely something that's highly dependent on the sovereignty and open business models, and this is where we decided at Schwarz to build our own technology stack and build up our own cloud solutions, especially in terms of security, in order to make sure that not just ourselves but also our customers or our partners are able to, so to say, always walk away from the table without any consequences, without any vendor lock-ins. They are being able to freely decide when they're going to consume our services, when they're going to partner up, when they're going to jointly build something up with us in a co-innovation modus or in a modus of consumption, but they have always this opportunity to flexibly either consume or leave our services.
So in that case, I jump on that also, and you mentioned that. I guess that really is the key. We have to avoid all the lock-in effects that you're married with one specific platform only, which is a high risk for all the companies. So whether European or non-European, that is a fact for all of us. The second term you mentioned a couple of times is standards. That indeed is what we have to make sure people agree to. Of course, it makes us replaceable to some extent. I mean, of course, it's great if I can switch between different cloud providers, and either I'm gonna switch vertically or horizontally. That I go from cloud to edge, or even in the devices. The more I can do with standards, and the more I can do with standard APIs, of course, it's beneficial for the entire industry, and that should be indeed a design concept, important for everybody, basically anywhere where they are. So even European or not European, in that case, it's a technology, a design issue that should be respected by all of us.
So we've discussed a lot about the impact and the importance of sovereignty and why it actually matters. And I would like to get a little more practical now and look into what it actually takes to implement data sovereignty in industrial environments. Again, Mark, I think you're the right person to ask that question here, looking into architectural blueprints. What are, from your perspective, the key architectural aspects, or let's call it building blocks, that are needed to implement a sovereign interoperable data architecture for smart factories?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of key aspects when we try to get that flexibility and avoid that kind of lock-in that I was talking about. So when we think about these architectures, we think about them essentially in two layers. So the first layer would be like the basic infrastructure layer on which I run all my workloads, and then a data layer that runs on top of this that allows us to connect machines, provide data through unified namespace and so on. And first of all, I think it's really important to have a really standardized digital infrastructure on that infrastructure layer from the cloud to the edge that is really identical from a development and operations perspective for the cloud and on-prem, that lets you deploy all your workloads either to the cloud, to on-prem, and it always works the same way, where I can monitor my applications in the same way, where I can consume the data in the same way, and decide where I want to process my data. So this is the infrastructure layer that I have one digital infrastructure. And then on top of that infrastructure, we typically build an approach around a unified namespace, meaning that we provide all of our data through a pub/sub mechanism, typically an MQT broker, that we standardize the data as close to the data source as possible, that lets us break open data silos that have existed so far, where we standardize the data and offer it for consumption to whoever wants to consume it and has the permissions to do so. And by standardizing the data through a unified namespace, we also it also helps us to abstract away from heterogeneity that we usually have in our plans, because you have a lot of different PLC providers, machines, etc., across just one plant, but even more so across many plants. And in order to provide use cases, standardized use cases for all of these plans, you need some form of standardization of your data as well. So this is a second key aspect in the infrastructures that we are building.
Mark, that sounds like a perfect world. Do you see that in real life?
Yeah, we actually do see it, and more and more companies are moving into that direction. What we often see to be overlooked by companies is this infrastructure layer. So a lot of people are thinking about topics like unified namespace and making machine connectivity easier and getting the data in the data lakes, things like this. But often they forget the infrastructure part. So they need an easy way to really automate the infrastructure, to roll this out to all of their plants at scale, to operate this with a small, efficient team. So this is often overlooked, and then companies start setting up VMs manually and build, one infrastructure after the other, which can get quite expensive and time-consuming. Peter?
Mark, may I ask you something? Of course, that convergence, standardization, decoupling, what you just said, yeah, that sounds, as Lara said, like a perfect world, but it sounds, you talked about movement and we talk about digitization since more than a decade and everything is very slow. Isn't that too slow, all of this effort? Doesn't that cost speed?
And we also see that many companies, there are some companies that really pick up speed and really roll out this quickly across all their plans, usually when they have backing from C-level, and there's really a big initiative that's supported also by top management. And then we see other companies where they, you have the one person that is responsible for a smart factory, and they try to do as much as they can with limited resources and don't really get anywhere. So it really depends on how these projects or initiatives are set up in companies, and if the companies are really behind those initiatives.
I'd like to put the image of a smart factory in comparison to how it actually is. And Martin, maybe you're the right person to ask here. So from a manufacturer's perspective, how does it look like in the factory side?
What Mark described is the target architecture. Basically, we would like to put in place, and I would say that we're Schunk is size-wise not a super large company, but not a very small neither. So we can afford to put some efforts on that one. So on the architectural side, basically, Mark, what you described is what we'd like to achieve. We would add a third layer, basically. We've got this infrastructure layer that basically takes care of the interoperability, making sure that we are connecting to all the different devices and machines. we've got a data lake or something like a data lake, which gives us a unified a place where we're able to store the information. And on top of that, we've got a semantic layer, which is the most complicated one, because that means that we have to involve the people from all the different units, making sure that all the data points, they make sense and they are to some extent standardized within our company. So the first two layers are now in place. The semantic layer is under construction. And this is probably where you have to put a lot more effort than you initially think. And that brings me to the point which is also why Peter raised the point. Why are we so slow? I mean,
I wasn't referring to you, Martin.
No, I mean, we try to be as fast as we can, and we're not as fast as I want us to be. But the thing is, I mean, the most critical point is that you have to convince C-level to spend money on that one, and you have to make sure that all the middle managers. It's not only about the C-level; it's really about how that information goes down into all the operational units. And for that, what is lacking is really the immediate value of what we're doing. And if you do the digital transformation in a smart factory, the effects, they are not very immediate. I mean, you don't see the results the next day, but it will take some time, and you will find the most appealing applications and innovations popping up over time. And you have to make sure that it's a process. It's really an entire process. We just talked about one of those issues we're facing right now, and we realized that we have not yet the transparency we need to do a larger optimization on the factory. So we have to invest more to really get onto that level, and afterwards we've got the leverage to really gain that whatever 2% of efficiency afterwards. But it's a bet in the future, and that is probably one of the biggest issues. Operationally, even right now, we're in a crisis. Well, the entire industry, at least in Europe, is in a crisis. So we tend not to spend too much money on the very long-term goals, but we have to, because that is probably where we've got the biggest leverage for efficiency gains in the future. So a long answer to what was the simple that very simple question. What are we really doing? We do our best to get that incremental improvements in the digital efforts we're going to put in the factory. We are not so bad. Now we're at that critical stage of identifying the data. So once you do that, and I mentioned that before, you need data governance for that. Who is the person in charge who controls, who takes responsibility about the specific data points, and who can validate them, who can verify them? That is indeed where we're struggling right now, finding the people, putting the efforts in those ones, and also identifying the value immediately. The value will come, I'm convinced, but writing that down and convincing the people is probably one of the issues we're facing right now.
I'd like to add something to the value aspect of what you just said. I also think it's really key to create value as soon as possible. So when we approach these initiatives, we try to build up these solutions, this target architecture that I described, in an iterative manner, and use new use cases that bring value to drive that implementation. So we do this step by step, and always as far as we need it for the additional use cases, and the use cases always already bring value, and that really helps to not spend a lot of time and effort and wait till you then sometime later on you see a return on invest, but keep getting a return on invest continuously on what you're building.
I have a very nice question that we will tackle in a second, but one question I would like to tackle first together with Peter, because what I hear is time and effort and value that is delayed. All those aspects are quite familiar to me, at least. I think to you as well. Maybe you can share how you considered this in the strategy of the product that you deliver to the market, and how other vendors do this as well.
Yeah, first of all, I think I can just agree with everything that you have said, Martin. and also with Mark, somehow you need to find the right balance, coming up with a right long-term strategy, building a foundation that lasts. I mean, that is in the end, it's the industry. So factories are not built within a day, and they run for 20 years. So everything that we build must be very sustainable from a technology point of view. But at the same time, we are today in a world where technology the cycles are so quick. I mean, we are now 3 years in with ChatGPT, and still every week I discover something that I wasn't aware that was already possible, or new models come up and new applications come up. And most factories, and Martin, the factories at Schunk as well, have been built before there was the iPhone even. So it's literally from a different time. So we need to find the right middle ground, I think. And this is what we try to deliver from Cybus. So we try to help factories, on the one hand, augmenting the production floor, which is slow moving because there was investment, there's a depreciation going on, machines are not just simply swapped. So you have to augment this slow physical factories with a layer that allows to connect to the fast-moving world. So what we build is a middleware layer, basically, Cybus Connectware, which basically builds this bridge and acts as a foundation, as a backbone, if you want to, for exactly what you all have said, a very modular overall architecture where not every decision needs to be taken today, because you don't know which MES you have next year, or if next year already there's a mega AI that can just run your production. That might happen, or at least a small variant of that. You don't know if next year you want to switch cloud from one hyperscaler to the other. You cannot take all of these decisions yet. You must position yourself or your company in an agile way. So agility is also an aspect of sovereignty, if you ask me. So being able to change direction with low cost and low risk. I think that adds on to what you said, Alex, being able to get off the table, change your decision, changing suppliers, changing technologies, changing applications. But all of this agility must somehow made fit to what cannot be changed quickly, and that is the actual factory, and that's where you earn your money. So this is, I think, the big challenge, and we, from Cybus' perspective, try to, in this difficult scenario, help bridging this OT-IT problems.
Cool, thank you, Peter. Then coming back to the statement that Martin just shared, you have to convince the C-level, and you have to create fast value. And I think a future outlook in how does data sovereignty and sovereignty in manufacturing actually improve the future and make you more competitiveness is something that makes sense for us now in this round. So taking you all to the future perspective, and how can we improve, for example, innovation implementation with data sovereignty? Which impact does it have on AI adoption? So all these aspects that are very, very crucial. And Alexander, from your perspective, I think that's nice to tackle it, looking into cloud and AI adoption. How do European cloud platforms enable faster AI adoption from your side? Oh, we cannot hear you.
I was muted, my apologies.
Yeah,
So the very straightforward, quick and dirty answer would be as simple as it is. And as brutally honest as it is, we host Cybus on our infrastructure and provide this direct connect towards the manufacturing and enable the manufacturing facilities to efficiently work with AI. What's the beauty of it, also working together with Cybus, is the co-innovation, enabling AI and using AI as enabler in order to help manufacturing companies in order to succeed in their goals. in order to succeed not just in operational efficiency, but also in operational resiliency. This is where we strongly believe that our setup, which we have built together also with Peter and his team in context of building stronger, secure, and resilient infrastructure supported and enabled with AI, helps not just us as in a partnership setup, but also in a setup where we are trying to enable and not trying or striving. We're enabling manufacturing companies to work more efficiently with AI. We are bringing our resources as a cloud service provider much closer towards the edge models, towards the manufacturing supply chain models, towards the production lines. And this is what is the key of the also of the digital sovereignty, so that everyone can, on one hand side, consume. On the other hand, they can flexibly decide when they're going to consume or when they're going to take their data and to shift their service hosting models, provisioning models to some other cloud service provider. So it's a mix of and trade-off of both flexibility and efficiency.
Peter, anything to add from the edge or from the local infrastructure perspective?
Yeah, in the end, I mean, AI is of course the topic nowadays, and AI is already capable of doing so many things. And as I just said, I strongly believe that we will see the next generation of industrial software very soon. So the dashboard, which is a conversational AI, the MES, which is not only like a production management system, but maybe even can already plan production more independently. So this next generation of AI native, not just with a copilot, but AI native applications will come up very soon. I still don't know which players will be the providers, but I think the big question from a strategic point of view for the C-level, as you said, is my factory ready for that? What happens and what will be the competitive advantage of a factory that is sooner ready for this next generation of software, working with probably less number of people in a more efficient way? I think then the time pressure will really increase. And so this race of getting AI ready, I think, just has started.
Actually, that's the best transition for the next question, because of course there are weaknesses and gaps in every strategy, and looking into the EU data sovereignty and EU reference architectures, of course there might be some gaps. And Mark, maybe we can elaborate on that a little more in detail. From your perspective, where are the biggest weaknesses when you compare European offerings with the global hyperscalers?
So I think the parts that Peter just described, there we have already good alternatives on the market, like Cybers Connect, where you can make data available to provide this semantic layer that Martin was talking about to get data into usage and contextualize data. So there we have have good solutions on the market. I think where we still have big gaps, or the biggest gaps are really in data analytics and AI platforms. Really, it's just really hard to compete with offerings from Databricks, Snowflake, or Azure Fabric that have really poured a lot of investments and engineering effort into these platforms over the last year, and that's the same on the AI platform side. So currently, I essentially mostly see offerings that just put together a couple of Apache projects and provide it as a managed service, but it's not at the same level that these more global companies like Databricks or Snowflake or Azure and AWS can provide today.
I saw some people nodding here.
And what's going to be interesting, so what we're going to do with the situation. So maybe it's what SAP is currently doing, that they then offer SAP Databricks, which they currently, I think, still host on the hyperscalers, but I think also plan to host on their own in their own data centers. Maybe that's an approach, not trying to re-implement Databricks, but to offer it as a managed service. Hard to predict.
Yeah. Okay, then we have one very, very short last question before jumping into the Q&A. Martin, I would ask you as a last question for the round, if there are any new business models or collaboration opportunities that are enabled through sovereign ecosystems. I know I have very hard questions today. I'm sorry for that.
Why isn't that a quick and a short question? It's a very complicated one. But no, seriously, I guess there's a huge opportunity we're addressing right now, and AI, as Peter and everybody said, and everybody knows now, it's one of the big issues right now. And if we talk about how we can all profit and benefit from that, we have one of the few last unique European qualities that we can defend, and that is we've got a lot of skills and understanding of how to do manufacturing. However, that information is only used within single companies. We're talking about right now building these industrial foundation models about all the skills we have developed within Europe, where we can share that information with the partners and build an industrial foundation model that will be used by the companies, by basically whatever company, but we can somehow benefit from that by being somehow being able to participate in the gains that will be realized with these European or industrial foundation models. How exactly that will be done, it is a little bit unclear. It is basically, we all agree that we have that knowledge, we have those possibilities. The large language models, they are fed by any public documents. These industrial foundation models will be fed by the data coming from the different companies and partners. We have to make sure that those are built in a way that they are safe and controlled with a sovereignty concept architecture in place. And afterwards, we can think about how we can build all the business models that we can share the revenues that are coming out of those ones. And that is for me the really interesting and driving part right now, because we talk to a lot of partners and customers about this idea. Everybody agrees on that and jumps on the idea. We're still struggling in getting that implemented. But with the companies like Cybers and data lake and semantic layers, as we're looking into right now, we've got all the ingredients for building that. We have to share that information. That is the next big step. And afterwards, as I said, that for me is the biggest opportunity for Europe in general, because we can be quick on that one, and we can create some European benefit out of that. Where indeed the entire world will be able to benefit from, but we got to be somehow in the driver's seat.
Thank you, Martin. I'd hand over to the questions from the audience, because we received a couple of questions. For everyone who contributed, every question that we will not answer today, we will answer it in the follow-up. So thank you for sharing your questions with us. And I would start with the first question that you can also now see. One second, that you can now see in the room. What are the most common cybersecurity blind spots that you see in industrial IoT deployments, especially when following EU data sovereignty?
Mark, maybe question for you. Mute.
The shocking thing is that it's often the basic things like a proper network segmentation is still missing at some companies. You don't even have to look at EU regulation. It's often very basic things that really need to change. So things like micro segmentation or zero trust networking, like these things are not as much in place as they should be.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Very often, especially pilots, but also surprisingly large deployments are trying to work around IT departments and cybersecurity audits. And especially when you go to the shop floor, this is from a cybersecurity point of view, total Wild West. I mean, most machines have open network communication ports without encryption and without passwords. And when you are in there, you cannot only read data, but control the machine. So this is not only a data security, but it's a safety question, because you can make the robot turn the wrong way and hurt people or destroy business value, things like that. So I think a proper cybersecurity architecture with a proper governance model, access control model, and really, yeah, in the end, a governance also about which communication is allowed to take place. That is the basics, and I don't see that everywhere. And sometimes I see it in an exaggerated way, so strict that the projects are essentially blocked. Yeah, total secure. I mean, there is a contradiction. We want to connect everything, but we try to keep it secure. This is a contradiction we need to solve. And also, I think, as usual, you need the right middle ground for security and innovation.
Okay, thank you. Turning to the next question, quickly share it here. What are the biggest emerging threats to critical infrastructure in the next 5 years?
Mark, it's you again.
Yeah, I was just thinking about emerging. So there are already sufficient existing ones, but emerging could even be around about Gen AI models, because we don't know what they have been trained on, what they're going to do if somebody has manipulated the training data, poisoned the training data essentially. This might become one bigger security issue that we can't really predict yet how bad that part will get. And beyond that, don't even have to do the fancy stuff. I mean, if you drop 5 USB sticks on the parking lot in front of a factory, somebody will pick it up and plug it into their computer. So, it doesn't have to be the fancy attacks, but if somebody really wants to compromise your company, these things are really hard to defend. And if they really specifically target people, that is extremely difficult. So it's a lot about having to train your employees to make sure as much as possible that these things don't happen. But it's very difficult to defend.
I can relate to that, and it's going to get even more challenging, even more problematic, because as highlighted in the question, emerging threats, they come with emerging technologies which we are confronted with. We will see on daily basis new technologies being implemented in your manufacturing world, in the IoT world, or generally in the cloud. And this is where we have to relate to these technologies to help us, just as much as we are relating now to the AI to help us make decisions in cybersecurity in order to help us make more efficient, more faster decisions, because the same methodologies and techniques are being used by the attackers itself. They are all using AI in order to generate malware, in order to generate some kind of spoofed AI prompts, which can then build malware within the company itself. This is what we're seeing today on a daily basis. In the future, if you're going more towards in manufacturing worlds to human-robot interaction models, where the human and robots are going to tightly interact with each other in order to be more efficient, then it becomes much more of a safety issue for the person interacting with a robot who can be compromised. This is what Peter highlighted. So we have a very complex world where we need to address all of these topics one by one. AI comes as a blessing and a curse. This is what we highlight from our perspective. On one hand side, it helps us increase efficiency, but on the other side, from cybersecurity perspective, it makes our life much more harder, because the attackers are much more efficient nowadays because of it.
And it also makes it easier to impersonate others. So these things, somebody impersonating your CEO or whoever with deepfake audio or video calls. So it's probably going to be a lot about authentication, making sure you actually are talking to the person you think you're talking to. So I think that will also be an important aspect in the future.
I'd share one question that goes exactly in that direction, and of which many components we have already tackled. Someone asked, when it comes to EU data rules, how can manufacturers get the insights they need from the IoT systems without running into compliance issues? I think this has a very special. You're laughing already. I know that's a hard question, but specifically in the EU, it's super important because we have so many rules. We have the EU Data Act, we have the AI Act, etc. What would you suggest here?
The question goes to who?
You all.
Martin, would you like to do?
I don't know the answer. I was laughing because, of course, it is one of the biggest issues, and how to do that. I mean, we try to get as much help as possible from all the organizations that are out there. Honestly, I think that to some extent, some of the rules will be loosened or changed in a way that we don't run immediately into some of those issues. But the Data Act is complicated, but it's complicated just with the things we have today, without adding new devices and new features in our smart factories. That's the first thing. The AI Act. Sometimes we have to be careful that we don't overinterpret. So we had discussions with the people who wrote that, and I guess sometimes it's our own compliance departments that put up the barriers that are not even written directly in the AI Act, for example. So we have to. I mean, very honestly, we have to think about how we can.
Don't be irritated by the poll, Martin. You can just continue.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, honestly, sometimes we have to be brave enough to. I'm not saying that we should break the rules, but we have to be do the step ahead and start working it out. There will be solutions coming up, and we should not stop doing things that are necessary to do just because there's a regulation which we interpret in the most hard way, and their workarounds. And I guess we have to talk to the EU, which, by the way, we're doing all the time. Not the company itself, but not the governmental institutions, the organizations, the VDMA and others. They're really pushing and trying to make sure that we are not stopped, that we are not hindered by the regulations. And at the same time, without doing all the bashing, all the regulations, they help us because they enforced us to think about data much more than we did in the past. So it's not like everything is bad that is coming from that direction. It really helped us in pushing some technologies forward to go into real deployment. So not everything is bad, but whenever we see that there's an issue, we should not stop immediately, but we have to think about how to circumvent the problems.
Martin,
I just want to add one thing to add. That it really also helps us directly in some cases. So, for example, the EU Data Act also forces companies to provide data from their machines to the companies buying them, so that you can access the data from your machinery. So there, it explicitly helps you, even where before it might have been difficult to get data out of certain machines, or you would have to pay a lot of money for it. So in this case, it also directly helps us.
Thank you so much. That's a perfect statement for the end of the session, I would say. We're running out of time, so I would to thank you all for participating, for contributing, and also thanking the audience for joining us from all over the world through very uncomfortable timings, early in the morning and late at night. It was a very valuable session. We still have many questions open, which I really like. As I said, we will answer the questions, send them in the round, and also share some follow-up materials for everyone who participated. Mark, Alexander, Peter, Martin, thank you for joining. And Have a very good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lara.
Thank you also.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.